Have you bought this hanging plant crochet kit from Kmart? Are you completely confused by the instructions? If so, know that you're not alone. Throw the instructions away, watch this tutorial instead, and I'll show you how to make this set of hanging plants. This is a very beginner friendly tutorial. However, if this is your very first time picking up a crochet hook, you might want to check out my Learn How to Crochet for Absolute Beginners playlist, particularly the videos on how to hold your hook and yarn, how to do a magic circle, and how to do a single crochet. Okay, so this is everything you get included in the kit. They give you some yarn which has been vacuum sealed, some polyfill, 2 of these little wooden circles, a 2.5mm hook. Now I will say the instructions for this kit are a big improvement on most of the Anko kits. The instructions are much clearer. They have step-by-step photo instructions, and generally I think these instructions are quite a significant improvement on most of the other Anko kits that I have done. One thing to be clear on though is that these instructions are written in UK terminology. So if you're new to crochet, you may not know that there are 2 crochet languages, US terminology and UK terminology. Frustratingly, the Anko kits, some of them are written in UK terminology, some are written in US terminology. And it can be really confusing because what's called a double crochet in UK terminology is actually called a single crochet in US terminology, and so it can be really confusing if you don't know which language your pattern is written in, and these instructions don't tell you. Now I'm going to use US terminology even though this pattern is written in UK terminology, just for consistency, because US terminology is the terminology I use across all of my other videos. I will include a link to a guide for how to convert between US and UK terminology in the description below. Okay, so this is what the yarn looks like when it's out of the package. It will be a bit squished, but if you give it some time, it'll start to puff up and look a little bit neater. Now I'm going to use my own crochet hook, so they include a 2.5mm, but I'm going to use my 2.5 Clover and More for this tutorial. Okay, so we're going to start by making the pots, and for that you'll want some of the white yarn. We're going to start by making a magic circle. Now magic circles can be quite tricky. I've included a link to a beginner's tutorial for how to do a magic circle down in the description, so if you're brand new to crochet, be sure to check that out. And I've also included an alternative approach in that video in case you're struggling to get the hang of the magic circle. But essentially, to do a magic circle, you want to hold your yarn tail facing down between your thumb and first finger. Then you want to wrap the yarn around your first 2 fingers, go underneath, and then cross the yarn into an X on top of your fingers and just hold it in place with your 3rd finger, like so. So you'll have an X on the front, and then you'll have 2 horizontal lines on the back. Then you want to take your crochet hook, go under this first strand of yarn here, and you want to hook this strand of yarn with the head of your crochet hook, and we're just going to pull it through to the other side, like so. Then you want to twist your crochet hook and push it through so that your hook is now sitting on top of the X. Also, make sure that you've pushed the yarn all the way down to the base part of your crochet hook. The size of the crochet hook actually relates to the size of the shaft, not the head. So to make sure that your loops are the right size, you want to make sure you're pushing them down onto the shaft of the crochet hook. Then we're going to grab this strand of yarn here, and we're just going to pull that through the loop on our hook. And that's a magic circle. Now I'll just show you that again, but actually I think that this hook is too small for this yarn. So this yarn is actually a little bit thicker than the typical yarn that is included in these Anko kits. So as an example, this is some of the yarn that I used for the octopus video that I did recently, and you'll see it is quite a bit finer than this yarn here, yet the 2.5mm size seems to be their standard size, but I just don't think this is the right size yarn for that size hook. So I'm actually going to size up to maybe a 3.5. I'm a little bit concerned that if I size up, I might run out of yarn. I'll use my 3.5mm hook and we'll see how we go. Obviously, if you don't have your own crochet hooks, then you'll need to stick with the 2.5 that they include in the kit. So again, to do the magic circle, hold your yarn tail facing down, wrap it around your first 2 fingers and into an X. Insert your crochet hook under this first strand of yarn. Grab the second strand of yarn and pull it through to the other side, and then twist it on top like so. And then we're going to grab this strand of yarn here and pull that through the loop on our hook. Okay, then we're going to do 8 single crochets into the magic circle. Note that the pattern calls them double crochets but that's because they're using UK terminology. And again, if you're new to crochet, be sure to check out the beginner's tutorial for how to do a single crochet. Now, I'm hoping that there's a stitch marker somewhere in here. There is a tapestry needle, doesn't appear to be a stitch marker. Yeah, and it doesn't look like they include a stitch marker in this kit, which is frustrating because when you're working in the round, like we will be for this pattern, you really do need a stitch marker. If you don't have your own stitch markers, then you can use bobby pins, safety pins, or even another scrap piece of yarn to work as your stitch marker. So to begin, we're going to do a single crochet into the magic circle. So when you're working into the magic circle, you just want to insert your hook into the circle before you start your stitch. And you're going to yarn over, so drape the yarn over the top of your crochet hook, catch the yarn in the head of your crochet hook and pull it through the circle. You'll then have 2 loops on your hook. You're going to yarn over and pull through those 2 loops, and that's a single crochet. Again, feel free to check out the beginner tutorial linked in the description if you need a slower tutorial for how to do a single crochet. Now we're going to insert our stitch marker. To insert a stitch marker, you just want to insert it under both prongs of the V of the stitch that you've just done. So you'll see there's 2 kind of prongs of yarn in a V formation. That's the top of your stitch, and you just want to insert it under both prongs of that V. And that marks the first stitch of the row. And the reason it's important to do this is because when we're working in continuous rounds, we'll essentially be working in a spiral formation. You won't know where your row starts and ends unless you have a stitch marker. So we're going to do 8 in total. So that's our first one. We'll do another 7 single crochets, each time just working into the magic circle. So again, insert into the circle, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. This hook size definitely feels much better with this size yarn, so if you are really struggling with the yarn, it might be because the included hook is just not big enough for the yarn. Okay, once you've done your 8 single crochets, and the way you can tell is just by counting the V's on the top. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then to close up our magic circle, you just want to pull on the yarn tail, so a little short piece of yarn, just pull that tightly, and your stitches will curl up into a little circle like so. And that's our first round done. Okay, for round 2, we're going to do 8 increases. And what an increase means is that you're just doing 2 stitches into every 1 stitch. So you're essentially doubling the number of stitches. So our first stitch is going to be this one with the stitch marker. So you just want to insert your hook basically into exactly where the stitch marker is. You can remove the stitch marker first if you find it hard to get into the stitch. And then we're going to do another single crochet. Now we're going to move the stitch marker because now we need to mark the stitch we've just done as the first one of round 2. And we're going to do a second single crochet into the very same stitch. So if you see, and again, I'm sorry, it's white, it's not the best color for this, but you'll see that there's a little bar of yarn coming out of this gap here, which is part of the stitch that we just did. You want to go straight back into that same gap where the stitch is coming out of to do a second single crochet, and that's an increase because we've now done 2 single crochets in the same stitch. Now we want to move on to the next stitch, and I'll just show you where I'm inserting my hook. So on the top of your stitch you have the V, it's got a front prong and a back prong, and then this part here is the base of the stitch, and essentially you want to insert your crochet hook under the V on top of this base, so just into this gap here. And again, we're doing 2 single crochets into this next stitch. So that's the first one. And then we're going straight back into where that stitch is coming out of to do a second. And you just want to do this for every stitch around. So by the end of this round, you'll have 16 stitches because you've done 2 into every one of the 8 stitches from round 1. Okay, so once you get back to the stitch marker, it's a good idea to just count your stitches again. You should have 16. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. And again, just you can count by counting the V's. If you've got more or less than that, then you might have accidentally worked into the wrong stitch or not done an increase. If you do ever make a mistake in crochet, it's really easy to go back. You can just remove your crochet hook and pull on the yarn back to wherever you made the mistake, and then you can just reinsert your crochet hook back into that loop and start again. Can take a little bit of practice when you're new to seeing where your stitches are and making sure you're doing the right number of stitches into each individual stitch. Okay, now for round 3, we're going to alternate between single crochets and increases. So into the first stitch, the one that's got our stitch marker, we're going to do a single crochet. So again, I'm just going under that V of the stitch and doing 1 single crochet, and then I'm moving my stitch marker into that new stitch. Then we're going to move on to the second stitch, and into that second stitch we're going to do an increase, so 2 single crochets into that stitch. So 1, 2. Into the third stitch we're just going to do the 1 single crochet, and into the fourth we'll do an increase, so 2 into that fourth stitch. And then essentially you're just repeating this pattern all the way around. So single crochet, increase, single crochet, increase. Your final stitch of this round should be an increase. And you should have 24 stitches. Then for round 4, we're going to do single crochet, increase, single crochet, and then repeat that pattern. So into the first stitch, we'll just do the 1 single crochet and move our stitch marker. Into the second stitch, we'll do an increase, so 2 into that second stitch. Into the third stitch, we'll do a single crochet. And then we repeat the pattern. So into the fourth stitch, we do another single crochet. Then we do an increase. And then another single crochet. And then just keep repeating that pattern of single crochet, increase, single crochet. And by the end of row 4 you should have 32 stitches. Okay, now we're going to fasten off. So to fasten off you just want to cut a yarn tail. So you want to leave a long yarn tail, although not too long because I find they often don't include enough yarn, so you want to be a little bit careful. And just cut that off. And then to fasten off you just want to yarn over, so drape the yarn over your hook and pull it through, and then just pull it all the way through. And pull that tight, and that will create a knot that will stop your work from coming undone. Now we need to secure this initial yarn tail. So this tail here, where we started our work, we need to weave this yarn end in, or otherwise there's a risk that our magic circle will come undone. So to do that, you want to use your tapestry needle. They include a plastic one in the kit. These are really tricky to work with, so I'm going to use my metal one. And you just want to thread the tail onto the tapestry needle. And then we're just going to weave this in and through our stitches. So there's no kind of perfect science to this, but you want to work under at least 4 or 5 stitches, and you also want to work in at least 3 different directions. And you're just working under and through your stitches to help secure this tail in place. So once you feel confident that that tail is nice and secure, you can just trim this tail with your snips. But we don't want to weave in this final yarn tail just yet because we'll need that for when we're sewing up. So then you just want to repeat this process again a second time to make your second base. Now for the pot itself, we're actually just going to repeat the exact process we made for the base up until the end of the base, and then we're going to make the sides. So you can just follow the same instructions, which I will put up on the screen. So again, for your magic circle, you want to have your yarn tail facing down. Wrap it around your first 2 fingers under this first strand of yarn, grab the second, pull it through and twist it on top, and then grab this strand of yarn and pull it through, loop on your hook. And then you can just follow the instructions on the screen, which is exactly the same as what we did to make the base. Okay, so once you get to the end of row 4, you should have 32 stitches. Now for row 5, we're going to do 32 single crochets, but we're going to work into the back loop only. So on the top of the V of your stitch, there are 2 loops. There's the loop that's closest to you, this is called the front loop, and then there's the loop that's furthest away from you, that's the back loop. So normally when we're working into a stitch, you go under both prongs of the V like so. But instead this time we're going to go under the back loop only, which means we're going to insert our crochet hook into the middle of the V. So there'll just be that one prong of the V on your stitch. And then we just do a single crochet as normal. And we're just going to do this into each stitch around. So again, we're just going under that back loop and doing a single crochet. We'll do this 32 times in total. Okay, so what you'll notice now is that there's a little ridge here along the bottom of the row that we just did, and these are basically the front loops that we didn't work into. So the reason we do the back loop only is because now we're going to do the sides, and this creates a nice little edge or ridge to the bottom of our pot. So it is important that you want this side with that ridge on it to be on the outside of your pot. See, on the inside you won't see a ridge. The inside will also have this tail poking out of it. So this side here is the outside of your pot, this side here is the inside. Okay, then for rows 6 through to 10, we're just doing 32 single crochets all the way around. So this time we are working under the stitch as normal. So you're going under both prongs of the V and then just doing, 32 stitches, not 36. And then you're just doing that for 32 stitches all the way around. So just one single crochet into every one stitch. And you want to do this for 5 rows in total. So once you get back to your stitch marker, make sure you move it into your first stitch of the next round. For each of rows 6 through to 10, you're just doing 32 single crochets, and I'll meet you back here at the end of row 10. Okay, so once you finish row 10, you should have something that looks like this. Now again, you might have found that your work was actually curling in this way as you were working, but this is actually the wrong side of the work, and again the way that you'll know is where the yarn tail is. One way to remember which way is the right way around is to think about the fact that the noodle needs to go inside the bowl. Also on the right side of the work you'll be able to see that little ridge from where we did back loops only. So now we just need to fasten off, so we can do this in the same way as the base. Leave a yarn tail, drape the yarn over your hook and pull it all the way through. Now we also need to weave in our initial yarn end, so just push your work through to the wrong side, and then you just want to weave in this end with your tapestry needle just like we did for the base, and then you want to repeat this process a second time to make your second pot. Now with this yarn tail, you don't actually need to trim this one if you like, because we're going to be stuffing the pot. So this yarn tail can actually just form part of the stuffing. Okay, so the next thing we need to make is the hanging rope. And for that we're just going to do chains. So to start to do a chain we need to do a slip knot. So the easiest way I find to do a slip knot if you're new is just to hold the ball of yarn to the left of you and the tail to the right of you, and then grab the tail of your yarn and loop the yarn into a big loop like so. Then just put your finger on the X of the loop, pick up the loop and just drag it over the tail end. So not this end, but the tail end. Then we're just going to grab this little bit of yarn that's sitting in the middle of the loop now and pull that through. And that creates a big loop with a slip knot. You can insert your hook into that big loop and then just pull on both the yarn tail and the working yarn to secure it to your hook. Don't pull it too tightly because we do need to work through this loop. And then we're just going to do chain stitches. So chain stitches are very simple. You just want to drape the yarn over your hook and then pull it through the loop on your hook. And we're going to do that 30 times in total. I usually find after about 4 or 5 chain stitches you might want to move your finger up. Then once you've done 30 chain stitches, again you can count them by just counting the V's. You want to leave a long yarn tail because we're going to use this to secure the ropes to the pot. Just trim that off and then just yarn over to fasten off in the same way. Okay, now to start with the leaves. Now the large and small leaves that we're going to make first is in this lighter kind of lime green yarn. The two yarn colours are quite close, but essentially there's one that's a little bit more limey, a little bit more bright, and one that's a little bit more dark. So you want the lime coloured one. And we do another slip knot just like we did for the rope. So again, yarn ball to the left of you, yarn tail to the right, hold on to the yarn tail and drape it into a big circle, finger on the X, drape the circle over, and then pull this bit of yarn through. And then we're going to start by doing 21 chains. Okay, now we're going to work into the second chain from our hook. So this is our first chain, this is our second chain. So we're going to ignore this first chain and we're going to work into the second chain. And to work into the chain stitches, we're actually just going to go under that top loop. So we're going to insert our crochet hook basically into the middle of the V of the stitch. And into that, our first stitch, which is our second chain from our hook, we're going to do a single crochet and we're going to do that into the first 3. So 1, 2, 3. Then into the next 3 stitches we're going to do what's called a half double crochet. To do a half double crochet you want to yarn over before you insert your hook into the stitch. Then you want to yarn over and pull up a loop. You'll have 3 loops on your hook, and then yarn over and pull through all 3 loops. And again, I've included beginner tutorials for all of these stitches below if you need a slower tutorial. So we'll do that into 3 stitches in total, so into the next 2. So yarn over, insert your hook, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 3. Then we're going to do 3 double crochets. So for a double crochet you also yarn over before you insert your hook into the stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop. You'll have 3 loops on your hook. Then we're going to yarn over, but we're only going to pull through the first 2 loops. So we'll yarn over, pull through those first 2 loops. Now have 2 loops on your hook, and then yarn over and pull through those 2 loops. That's a double crochet. So we'll do 3 of them in total. So again, yarn over, insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Then we're going to do 4 treble crochets. So to do a treble crochet, we're actually going to yarn over twice. So you yarn over once, then yarn over a second time, then insert your hook into the stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop. You'll have 4 loops on your hook, yarn over, pull through the first 2 loops. You'll now have 3 loops on your hook, yarn over, pull through the next 2 loops. You'll have 2 loops on your hook, yarn over and pull through those final 2 loops. And then we're just going to repeat this 4 times in total. Then we're going to do 3 double crochets. Two half double crochets. So yarn over, insert, pull up a loop. You'll have 3 loops, yarn over, pull through all 3. Do that twice. Okay, so at this point you should have 2 chains left. Into the second to last chain we're just going to do a single crochet. Then into the very last chain we're going to do an increase. So we're going to do 2 single crochets into that last chain. Now we're actually going to work on the flat side of the leaf. So we're going to work back under the remaining prong from our starting chain. And under this, so generally where we're working is into these gaps here, we're working kind of under this bar that you'll see along the bottom of the leaf. So under this first bar we're going to do a single crochet. Then into the next 2 we're going to do half doubles. So that's yarn over before you insert your hook, and then you pull through all 3 loops. Into the next 3 stitches, we're going to do double crochet. So yarn over, insert, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Do that 3 times. Then we're going to do 4 triples. So again, triple, you yarn over twice, then insert your hook, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. I'm going to do 4 triples. Then we're going to do 3 doubles into the next 3 stitches. 3 half doubles, and finish off with 3 single crochets into the last 3 stitches. Then we can fasten off. And there's your first leaf, and you just need 1 of this big size. Then we're going to make some smaller ones. So we start the smaller ones in the same way. We're going to chain 17 this time. This time we're going to work into the second chain, so we'll ignore this first chain, we'll work into the second chain here, and we're going to start with 2 single crochets into the first 2. Followed by 2 half double, 2 double, 4 treble, 2 double, 2 half double, a single crochet in the second to last stitch. Then we'll do an increase into the last one, so 2 single crochets into that stitch. Then we're going to turn our leaf around and work on the other side of the starting chain, and we will start with a single crochet, 2 half double, 2 double, 4 treble, 2 double, 2 half double, and 2 single crochets into the last 2 stitches, and fasten off. And then you just want to repeat this process 4 times to make 4 small leaves. Okay, so the final step is to make the succulents. So again, we want to start with a slip knot. Now I'll show you how I actually normally do a slip knot. The way that I've shown you is just a way that's a little bit easier to see what's going on. But once you get more used to it, you can just do it how I do it, which is just to pull it through like so. But as a quick reminder, if you're still struggling with the slip knot, is to make a circle, put your finger on the X, pull that bit of yarn through, and then pull that through like so. Okay, we're going to start by chaining 9. Now we're going to work into the 4th stitch from your hook. So this is the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th. So we're going to be working into this chain here, and you can work into the chain whatever way you like. I find the easiest way is just to go under that top loop. But we're going to be doing a double crochet, so we want to yarn over first. So we'll yarn over, insert your hook into that chain, do a double crochet. Now we're going to do 5 double crochets all into that same stitch. And you'll have a little curve like so. Now we're going to do a popcorn stitch. So to do a popcorn stitch, you just want to pull up a big loop in your working yarn, just big enough that it's not going to come undone. Then we're going to insert our hook back into the first of those double crochets we did. So this piece here is the initial chain. You don't want to work into that one. Instead, you want to work into the top of your double crochet. If you're having trouble identifying which is the first double crochet, feel free to insert a stitch marker after you make that stitch, so it's easier to see later. So you want to insert your hook into that stitch, and then you're just going to put this loop back onto your crochet hook and pull it tight. Then we're going to do a slip stitch, which just means you want to yarn over, and then you're going to pull that yarn through both this loop and that initial stitch. And that creates a little popcorn stitch like so. Then you want to chain 3. And now we're going to join this 3 back into the base of the popcorn stitch. So if you just turn over your popcorn stitch, we're going to go back into this gap where we did all of our double crochets, and you should be able to tell because it'll be quite a large gap because of the number of stitches that's in there. So you just want to insert your hook into that gap and do a slip stitch. So again, for a slip stitch, you just want to yarn over, pull that yarn through, and then also pull it through the loop that's on your hook. And that's slip stitch. And then that's your first little popcorn done. And you just want to repeat this process, and we're going to do it 5 times in total for our first succulent stem. So we'll do another 9 chains. Again, we're working into the 4th stitch, so 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're doing 5 double crochets into that stitch. Then we're pulling up a big loop, inserting our hook from the front to the back under that first double crochet, reinserting the hook into that loop and pulling it tight, yarning over and pulling it all the way through. Chain 3, turn the popcorn stitch over and go back into that large gap at the base of the popcorn stitch and do a slip stitch. Then you just want to repeat this process 5 times in total for your first stem. So we'll do another 3. Okay, so once you've done the 5th popcorn stitch, you want to finish off by doing the chain 3 and slip stitching it back to the base, and then you can fasten off. And that's your first little stem of succulents done. Now you're going to do 10 in total. You'll do 2 with 5 bobbles, 2 with 6, 2 with 7, 2 with 8, and 2 with 9. So just keep repeating the process as many times as the number of bobbles that you need for that stem. And then once you've finished all 10, we can assemble our hanging plants. Okay, now we're ready to assemble our hanging plants. So we'll start with the pot that has the leaves. So what you'll need is one of your pots. You should have woven in this initial yarn end, but this yarn end will be loose. And then you'll have one base as well, and again you will have woven in and trimmed your initial yarn end and have one yarn end loose. Then what we want to do is attach our leaves to this base. So for your leaves you should have 1 large leaf and 4 small leaves. And for each of these leaves you want to weave in one of your yarn ends but leave one yarn end free. You probably want to weave in whichever yarn end is the shortest. Okay, then we just want to attach all of our leaves to our base. So to do that you just want to thread the remaining yarn tail onto your tapestry needle. And then essentially we just need to pull it all the way through the base. And then just come back up again through the leaf to secure it to the top and back down again. Leave this yarn tail loose for now, and you just want to repeat this process with all of your leaves. Okay, then once you've attached all of your leaves, now we can just knot these yarn tails here so that they don't come undone. To attach the base to the pot, we're going to use one yarn end, either the final yarn end from your pot or the final yarn end from your base. So whichever one is longer is the one that you'll want to use. And for me, that's the pot. So I'm actually just going to weave this end in now because I don't need it. Yeah, I can leave all of these yarn ends free because we can put them into the pot to form part of the stuffing. If they annoy you, you can just trim them off if you'd rather. Okay, I'll show you how to do the same thing with the succulents and then how to connect the base onto the pot. So really similar process with the succulent stems. We're just going to attach them through the base. Now for your succulent stems, one of your ends will have an initial chain 3 and the other end won't. So we want the end with the chain 3 to be the end that we connect to the base. So you just want to weave in all of the other ends, so the ends that come straight off a popcorn stitch. Now this is a little bit tricky to weave in your ends just because there isn't a lot of fabric to work with, but I suggest you just kind of work in and through that final popcorn stitch as well as you can. Another thing you can do as well, just to make these ends a little bit more secure, is to essentially create a knot by just inserting your hook into a stitch and pulling it through, but not all the way through, so there's still a big loop here, and then come in through that loop and pull that tight, and that will create a knot that will help ensure that that end doesn't come undone. And then you can just trim this end as close as possible to the knot. So you just want to do that with each of your stems. Okay, now we're going to attach the succulent stems in the same way. So the yarn tail you have left should be the one that's attached to this initial chain 3. And essentially we're going to go through the middle of the base so that that chain 3 sits along the top of the base and the popcorn stitch hang down. Keep in mind your stems will all be different lengths, so you might want to think about the kind of order that you place them in so that they have good variation in length. Okay, and then once you've threaded all of them through, again we can just knot the tails on the back end. Now I actually only have 8 stems. I ran out of this dark green coloured yarn. I wasn't able to make the 9th stem. I think in part because I was using a larger hook and also probably that I was a bit too generous with my yarn tails. Okay, and again you can either use this yarn tail here that's come off your base or the yarn tail on your pot to attach the base to the pot. So if you're not going to use this yarn tail, then you can also weave this in and knot it as well. Okay, now our next step is to attach the bases to the pot. So you just want to take one of your pots, have the initial yarn tail tucked in there. I'm going to use this yarn tail to attach the base to my pot, but as I mentioned, you can use the base yarn tail if you prefer. And then essentially what you want to do is wind up all of your loose tails and tuck them into your pot. and then kind of line up your base with your pot, and essentially we're just going to sew the base onto the pot. So the way that I suggest doing that is going up under one of the stitches in your final row of the pot, and then through one of the stitches on the base, come all the way through. Then you can go down through the next stitch on the base and down through the next stitch on the pot. And then you just want to follow this process all the way around. But actually stop just before you get to the end, because we're just going to add a little bit of polyfill before we completely close it up. Okay, so once you're almost all the way back to the start, we just want to put a little bit of stuffing in here. Now, if you had a lot of yarn tails like I do, you might not need a lot of stuffing, but if you had shorter yarn tails, you might need a little bit more. They give you way more than you need, so don't feel like you need to use anywhere near all of it. You just want to put enough in that it has a nice shape to it, but not so much that it is starting to show through your work. And then we can just finish seaming. Then once you're all the way back to the start, what you can do is insert your hook into the body of the pot and then just poke it out somewhere else in the pot and pull it all the way through. Then you can remove your tapestry needle and just trim this yarn tail close to your work. And if there's a little bit poking out still, you can just wiggle it a little bit and it will be hidden into the pot. Okay, and then you just want to repeat this exact process for the succulent pot. By seaming the base and the pot, stuffing it, and then closing it up. Okay, then the next step is to attach our ropes. So you have 3 ropes for each pot. So I would suggest attaching the rope to the pot with the smaller of the 2 yarn tails. And essentially you just want to attach it in 3 different locations along the edge of the pot. You can do that by just inserting your hook under a few stitches. And I would suggest doing another stitch just to make sure that it is nice and secure. And I think just because this is going to be hanging from this, we want to be really confident that it is not going to come undone. So I'd suggest doing a knot again by leaving a loop and then pulling that all the way through and pulling that tight. And then again, we can hide this yarn tail in the same way as we did earlier by inserting our hook into the pot and pulling it out. So then you just want to repeat this with the other 2 ropes. Okay, and then the final step is just to attach the other end of our rope to the wooden circles. Now, the instructions have a kind of complicated approach for doing a gathering wrap. I could not for the life of me figure out how to do that. If any of you are macrame makers and you could make better sense of the instructions than me, please let me know in the comments how to do that. But I couldn't figure it out, so I'm just going to knot my ends essentially to connect them to the wooden ring. And there's our first one done. And so you can just attach your hanging ropes and wooden circle in exactly the same way for the succulent pot. Thanks so much for watching this video. I really hope that you found it useful. And if you made it to this point in the video, I'm so grateful. You are my people, and I am so glad that you found your way here. And if this project has got you hooked on crochet, be sure to like and subscribe for more info and inspo for new crochet makers. Also, if you're really wanting to master the art of crochet, be sure to check out my Learn How to Crochet kit in my YouTube storefront. So this kit is a little bit different from others that you'll find in the market. I've designed this kit more like a Learn How to Crochet masterclass in a box. And by that I mean that I've specifically designed the patterns so that they are ideal for beginners, cover all of the major stitches and techniques that you'll want to master when you're starting out. What this means is that by the end of the kit, you'll be able to tackle basically any beginner, advanced beginner, and even some intermediate crochet projects. So in this kit, you'll learn things like how to keep your edges straight, how to manage your tension, how to seam, and even how to do some color work. Each pattern builds on the skills that you learned in the previous pattern so that your confidence and your skill set will grow as you work through the kit. And by the end of the kit, you'll have some great little items that you can use around your house. The kit is also designed to teach you how to read a crochet pattern because I've included detailed long form written instructions alongside short form notation in the format that crochet patterns are typically written, along with detailed step-by-step tutorials. It also includes troubleshooting support and other handy tips and tricks. I've also designed the projects to expose you to different types of fibers, different styles of crochet, and different hook sizes, so you can start to learn what you really enjoy to crochet with. So make sure you go and check it out and let me know what you think. If you want to say thanks for any tutorial that you found useful, you can buy me a coffee, which is linked down in the description below. Thank you so much for crocheting with me today, and happy crafting!